Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. When I signed up for the contract aboard the MV Paradise Symphony, I was just hoping to save some money and maybe see a few sunsets over the Atlantic. Nothing glamorous, just another job in housekeeping, another floating hotel, another round of changing linens and unclogging drains. The cruise route was standard: Miami to Nassau, 2 days at sea, back through Key West. 6 days total. I'd worked bigger ships before, but this one was something else. 14 decks of marble floors, glass elevators, rooftop infinity pools, and art installations that probably cost more than my whole apartment complex back in Hialeah. My name is Emilio Rivera. I'm 27, born and raised in South Florida, and I've been working cruise ships for almost 5 years now. I started as a steward on the Carnival Glory, then bounced between Royal Caribbean and Norwegian. But this was my first contract with Aurelia Cruises. They paid better, slightly, and expected more. Guest experience above all, they told us at orientation. Our mission is excellence, safety, and unforgettable memories. Unforgettable, yeah, just not the kind they had in mind. Day 1. We left the port of Miami around 5:15 p.m., just after sunset. I was on deck crew duty, assigned to level 5 forward, near the midship cabins and one of the smaller lounges, the Crystal Room. My supervisor, Ivan Markovic, a Croatian guy with 10 years in maritime hospitality, was obsessive about protocol. Every door had to be propped open at exactly the right angle. Every hallway cleared of carts by 4:50 p.m. Every crew member smiling but invisible. Ghosts with cleaning supplies, he joked. Guests started boarding at noon, staggered into groups by VIP status. The richer passengers came first: owners' suites, penthouses, infinity terrace rooms. I helped an elderly couple from Coral Gables unpack their bags. He was a retired surgeon. She used to teach art history. They were sweet, joked about leaving their kids behind for some peace and drinks. They tipped me a folded 20, and I nearly refused. But Ivan caught my eye and nodded. "Take it," he mouthed. By 9 p.m., the atrium was a jungle of flashing wristbands, kids sprinting between elevators, and middle-aged tourists already 3 pina coladas deep. The cruise director, an Aussie named Marcus Trent, gave the usual welcome speech from the Grand Theater, hyping up spa discounts, karaoke contests, and our Bahamas day trip. Everyone was clapping and cheering. No one had any idea. Day 2. The first report came in during morning rounds. A guest in cabin 11214 was running a fever and refused room service. Housekeeping said she looked pale and was muttering something in Spanish about someone biting her arm. The ship's onboard doctor, Dr. Lucia Mendez, was called up. She ran a small infirmary on deck 2 aft, stocked with antibiotics, painkillers, and basic gear, but no ICU. Cruise ships aren't floating hospitals. If something serious happens, the idea is to chopper someone out or dock early. But we were deep in the Gulf Stream, hours from the nearest landfall. By lunchtime, 2 more guests reported flu-like symptoms. A child vomited in the pool. Someone passed out near the Atrium Cafe. I passed a passenger in the hallway dragging their feet and moaning softly. I figured they were drunk or seasick. We see that all the time. But the staff walkie-talkies were humming. More calls, more odd behavior. Then, at 4:37 p.m., it happened. Someone jumped. We heard the commotion from the service corridor near Deck 8. A scream, a burst of confused yelling from the upper promenade. I rushed up a flight of crew stairs and saw a small crowd gathered at the railing. A man, maybe mid-40s, had climbed over the barrier near the sky bar and jumped into the water. Security rushed in, cleared the guests away. They launched a rescue boat and circled around the port side. That should have been the end of it. But then came the radio call. Subject located, floating, head above water. No signs of struggle, not swimming, just staring up. I froze. That wasn't standard language. The man was recovered. No CPR was attempted. No one touched him except through gloves. Dr. Mendez was present, and they brought him below via a service elevator. Word didn't spread to the guests yet, but we knew. Every crew member with ears knew something was wrong. By evening, Captain Haruto Sato made a quiet announcement over the ship-wide intercom. As a precaution, we are temporarily suspending group activities and shore excursions. We are returning toward Florida for technical reasons. Please remain calm and contact the guest services desk with any concerns. Thank you for your cooperation. That night, security sealed off the infirmary. Medical personnel started wearing masks. Some of the Filipino kitchen crew began whispering rumors about blood, screaming, something about a bite. Ivan told us to stay off the gossip and do our jobs. I tried. But at 11:19 p.m., the Wi-Fi went down. And when I checked the crew portal again, it was locked behind admin access. Morning briefings were canceled. The ship drifted at half speed. We were 80 nautical miles from Nassau, but the Bahamas denied us entry. Public health directive, they said. Overnight, 7 more guests were isolated. The casino was shut. The pools were drained. I walked past a bar where the bartender served drinks with gloves on. The mood had shifted. People knew something was up. You could see it in their eyes. The glances toward every cough, the way they clutched their kids when a stranger got too close. Then we started hearing the sounds, thumping from inside locked cabins, moaning, furniture being knocked over. One of the stewards, Katya from Minsk, told me she passed a cabin where someone had smeared blood across the peephole. She reported it. Security locked it down. No follow-up. At noon, I was assigned to help with discreet laundry disposal. That meant hauling soiled linens from sealed cabins down to the incinerator chute near Deck 1. We wore full coveralls and double masks. The linens were soaked with something darker than blood. It smelled sweet and rotten. I gagged and had to step away. Dr. Mendez didn't come out of the infirmary that day. Instead, 2 men from guest services began posting memos in public areas. We thank you for your patience. Aurelia Cruises is committed to your safety. Please remain in your rooms until further notice. That afternoon, a lifeboat alarm went off. Someone tried to launch one of the emergency rafts. Security subdued them. Word spread fast. That night, the lights flickered. I was in the galley when the screaming started. One of the security staff, a guy named Charles from Jamaica, burst in, bleeding from his forearm. He kept shouting, "He bit me! He bit me!" over and over before collapsing. We backed off, unsure what to do. 10 minutes later, we heard pounding on the freezer door. Someone was inside. The captain issued a code black. Lockdown. No crew were allowed above Deck 6. The grand staircase was chained off, elevators disabled. Passengers were told it was technical maintenance. But some already knew. We'd seen video on a steward's private phone, shaky footage of a woman lunging at her husband, biting his throat. I tried calling my family, but the satellite uplink was jammed. Some crew said the military was blocking signals. Others claimed the infection had spread to Florida. At 3 a.m., Katya came to my bunk, pale and trembling. "They're not sick," she whispered. "They die. Then they get up again." I didn't believe her. I didn't want to. But by then I'd already seen the man in the hallway outside the laundry chute. His face was pale gray, eyes wide and glossy. He walked with a limp, dragging a leg, arms stiff at his sides. I called out to him, but he didn't answer. Just turned slowly, lips twitching, jaw hanging loose like it was broken. He didn't blink, he didn't speak, but he moved with purpose, slow but relentless, like a wind-up toy pushed into motion by something unnatural. There was blood, dried in a smear across his polo shirt, pooled in the crook of his elbow, and dark flakes at the corners of his mouth. He was barefoot, and one of his feet was twisted at a wrong angle. The smell hit me next, like sour meat and stagnant seawater. Something instinctual in me took over. I backed away, heart pounding, and slammed the service door shut between us. I didn't wait to see what he'd do. I turned and ran back through the crew corridor, not stopping until I hit the junction near the cold stores. Katya was gone. Either she'd moved on, or she was hiding. I couldn't blame her. Over the next several hours, the ship's interior devolved into a patchwork of makeshift barricades, abandoned cleaning carts, and flickering emergency lights. The main power grid was unstable. There were surges, then long stretches of brownouts. The emergency lighting system, meant for a full-scale evacuation scenario, had kicked in but was only running at half strength. Some stairwells were plunged into total darkness. The elevators remained locked. I reported to Ivan like I was supposed to, but even he had lost that professional coldness. His uniform was stained, and he was holding a fire extinguisher like a weapon. He barked at me to stay in the crew-only zones, to avoid the portside guest decks, and to do nothing stupid. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. By then, rumors were facts. A section of Deck 9 had been sealed off entirely. One of the poolside servers said he saw security dragging a man out of the sauna, blood running down his back, teeth marks on his shoulder. When they took him below, he was unconscious. An hour later, he got up and attacked a nurse. The infirmary was lost that afternoon. No announcement was made, but the door was welded shut by someone from engineering, and a red biohazard tag was stuck to the outside. No one dared open it after that. I saw one of the Filipino laundry guys cross himself as we passed it later that night. We were adrift. Captain Sato gave no new announcements. The bridge stopped responding to internal comms. A rumor spread that he'd locked himself inside the command deck with 2 officers and refused all contact. The ship's autopilot was engaged, but it wasn't steering toward Miami anymore. We were just drifting, somewhere off the eastern coast of the Bahamas, maybe 70 or 80 miles from land, though no one could say for sure. The GPS feed had gone offline with the Wi-Fi. The crew splintered into cliques and panic camps. Some of the security staff tried to take control, but they were outnumbered and scared themselves. One of them, a guy from Naples named Matteo, snapped and pulled a lifeboat launch lever. It jammed halfway and triggered a lockdown alarm. The rest of us just watched as he got tackled and zip-tied to a chair. No one had the heart to throw him overboard, but no one untied him either. Some of the senior staff retreated to a sealed crew lounge on Deck 4, hoarding supplies and cutting off access. They posted a guard at the service elevator and pretended like they weren't just saving themselves. I recognized the guard, Luis, a friend of mine from engineering. When I asked him what was going on, he just shook his head. "Too late, Emilio, we're on our own." That night, I wandered back down to the laundry sector near Deck 2. It was quieter there, cooler. A few other housekeepers had gathered, including an older woman named Violeta from Honduras and a teenage apprentice named Kaito, barely 19, from Osaka. We shared what little food we had, a crate of snack packs from a damaged vending machine and 2 bottles of electrolyte water someone had found in the spa area. We spoke in hushed tones. No one knew what the sickness was. It wasn't rabies. It wasn't flu. Whatever it was, it killed people, and then brought them back. But they weren't really alive. Their hearts didn't beat, their blood didn't flow, their skin turned gray and slack like overcooked chicken. Some of them even had broken limbs or crushed skulls and still moved. I saw one fall 3 decks through an atrium, Violetta said quietly. He hit the floor like a doll, legs shattered. He just stood back up 10 minutes later. We didn't have weapons. No firearms were kept on board. Aurelia had strict policies, like most cruise lines. Security had batons, pepper spray, and tasers. That was it. We improvised. Metal poles from mop buckets, fire axes from wall mounts, a heavy wrench Kaito carried like a bat. I had nothing but a box cutter and a flashlight at that point. By morning, a pattern had formed. The infected gathered in cool, dark areas. Conference rooms, theaters, closed hallways. They didn't sleep, they didn't eat. But they were drawn to movement and sound. Loud noises attracted them like sharks. They traveled in 2s or 3s. We found one huddled in a linen closet, still, silent, as if in hibernation. But the moment someone moved past, it lunged. We kept the lights low and stuck to narrow service tunnels whenever possible. We avoided the main stairwells completely. That's where the blood was thickest, where abandoned luggage and torn uniforms told a story without words. Sometime around midday on day 5, the real panic began. A group of passengers had discovered the sabotage. All but 2 of the lifeboats were disabled, launch gear tampered with, fuel drained, comms removed. Someone had deliberately made it impossible to evacuate the ship. We guessed it was done on day 2 or 3 while the crew still had access. Maybe it was the captain's orders. Maybe it was someone else. I found Katya again that afternoon. She was holed up near the crew sauna, organizing what she called a breakaway group. She'd found 10 survivors, 2 stewards, a cook, 1 nurse, and several guests who had either seen the truth or lost loved ones to the infected. They had a plan. Reach the ship's emergency operations room, EOR, on deck 2 forward. It was a hardened compartment with comms access, backup navigation, and, according to the cook, a supply locker with flares, a signal gear, and maybe a handheld marine radio. The problem was that the EOR was beyond a sealed bulkhead. The only way to reach it was through the service crawlspace that ran behind the midship spa, and the crawlspace ran right past the largest infected concentration on board, the Grand Theater. I said yes anyway. That night, we gathered near the staging point in the service galley. We had crude maps, flashlights, and a bundle of keys stolen from a deck officer's locker. Katya carried a fire axe. I had a carbon dioxide wrench from the extinguishing system. The cook, Maurice, a Haitian man built like a linebacker, had a sharpened meat tenderizer and a paring knife taped to a broom handle. We made it to the crawlspace access without incident, cutting through back corridors thick with steam and the faint hiss of broken refrigeration lines. The air was stale, heavy with mildew. The lights were dim red, backup mode. Every creak of metal made us flinch. Then, just before the crawlspace door, we heard them. Scraping, wet footfalls. Low, breathless moaning. Dozens of them gathered just on the far side of the bulkhead in the theater lobby. I peeked through the grating of an air duct. What I saw made my stomach knot. At least 20 infected, some barely recognizable as human. One still wore a sequined evening dress, though the left side of her jaw had been torn clean off. Another wore a crew lanyard, badge still intact, eyes completely white. We couldn't go through. But Morris had another idea. The ceiling crawl vent, the HVAC ductwork, ran above the theater. If we could climb up and drop down on the far side, we might bypass the infected entirely. It was risky, but everything was. We climbed. The vents were tight, barely wide enough for me to crawl on elbows and knees. They groaned with each movement. Sheet metal echoed every scrape. Below us, the moans intensified. A hand reached up through a loose panel. Someone screamed. Katya kicked the vent wall and it dropped back into place. We didn't stop. We dropped into the service corridor behind the EOR at 3:42 a.m. The breaker had been smashed. Copper wiring pulled loose and fused into a blackened twist. Somebody had taken a hammer or the butt of a fire extinguisher to the panel and wrecked it deliberately. Not in panic, but with intent. The paint was scratched deep, and the screws on the panel door were still warm. Whoever had done it hadn't gone far. And then there was the writing. 4 words, smeared across the wall in thick, congealing blood. We stay, they don't. They weren't written like a warning, more like a declaration, territorial, final. I stood frozen, trying to make sense of what that meant. We stay, meaning the infected, or the crew who sealed themselves in the EOR? Or was it someone else entirely, one of the passengers who decided this floating coffin was safer than any lifeboat? The air was thick with humidity and the smell of ozone from the shorted wires. I didn't have time to decipher it. I turned and ran, ducking back through the sagging corridor past the overturned janitorial cart and the spilled bleach trail, already fading. Every creak and shudder of the ship felt louder now, like it was drawing things to me. Back at the EOR, Katya was pacing in the shadows. Maurice sat on an overturned supply bin with his improvised weapon in his lap. The others, Kaito, Violetta, the nurse, and 2 frightened passengers, kept back from the door, whispering among themselves. The mood had shifted. Everyone could feel it. The lightness of hope that had driven us through the Wiencrawl was gone. I told Katya about the breaker. Her jaw clenched, and she stared hard at the keypad like it had personally betrayed her. "We'd try the emergency lock override," she said flatly, pulling a small flathead tool from her pocket. "There's a manual crank behind the bulkhead panel. Most people don't even know it's there." We pried the panel off slowly, metal bending and popping as the rivets gave. Behind it, as promised, was a small circular crank port, painted red and slightly rusted. Morris volunteered to turn it. The metal groaned. It took nearly 2 minutes of continuous shoulder-breaking effort before the locking bolts began to retract. One by one, they slid out of place with a shuddering clunk. The final one popped free with a hiss of released pressure. The door to the EOR cracked open 1/2 inch. Katya raised her axe and slowly pushed it inward. The room was dark. Only the faint green LED from a backup monitor blinked on the far wall. The smell was what hit us first. Burned insulation, old coffee, and something else underneath. Something like spoiled meat. We filed in, tense and silent. The EOR was intact but trashed, monitors smashed, chairs overturned, the comms panel hanging in a mess of wires and cracked casing. A handheld marine VHF radio, the kind used for short-range emergency contact, sat docked in a cradle on the counter. Its power light was off. I rushed to it, checked the battery, missing. Someone had taken it. What the hell happened here?" Maurice muttered. Katya didn't answer. She was looking at the wall again. More writing. Not blood this time. Marker ink. Thick and scrawled in lupin caps. "Do not signal shore." There was a shape in the corner, slumped below the auxiliary cabinet. A man in a torn officer's uniform. A maintenance keycard still clipped to his chest, but his neck was twisted at a horrible angle. The side of his skull was crushed inward. Someone had killed him, hard. We didn't speak for a long moment. Then Katya pulled herself together and started tearing through the drawers. "We need that battery. It's our only shot." If we can get that radio powered, we can call another ship, a tanker, a fishing trawler, something. We found spare flare cartridges, a roll of marine charts, and one unopened survival blanket kit, but no battery. They took it, Kaito said quietly. Whoever sealed this place. They took the comms offline so no one could call for help. That writing, containment equals survival. That's why the lifeboats were sabotaged. They think, if anyone leaves the ship, the infection spreads. He was right. And worse, I couldn't even say they were wrong. Later that day, we spotted the drone. It was faint at first, a soft buzzing outside the EOR's porthole. Just a flicker of movement in the gray, overcast sky. Then it swooped closer, hovering over the stern like an eye. Matte black, 4 rotors, no visible markings. Military, or at least government issue. We waved, shouted, flashed a flare out the ventilation hatch. It did nothing. It hovered another 20 seconds, then tilted and shot off over the horizon. We didn't see it again. Katya stood motionless for a long time after that, staring out over the water. "They're watching," she said, her voice hollow. "They know we're still alive." It confirmed our worst suspicion. The mainland knew, and no one was coming. That night, the theater deck was breached. One of the infected had wandered into the lower spa area near the locker rooms, where a pair of panicking passengers were hiding. The commotion, screams, a fire extinguisher discharged, attracted the rest. Within an hour, dozens of them had moved down from the upper promenade and into midship corridors. The barricades we'd seen from a distance, those makeshift tables and stanchions lashed with towels, were useless. By midnight, Deck 6 and 7 were lost. We retreated downward again, into the service tunnels and laundry shafts. We'd hoped to hold out in the EOR longer, but the vents were no longer safe. They had started climbing now. We found scratch marks in one of the vertical maintenance ducts, rust flakes scraped by fingers or nails. It didn't seem possible, but it was happening. Violeta was the first to crack. She broke away from the group while we slept, carrying a flare gun and a half-empty water bottle. She left a note scribbled on a cleaning voucher. "I'm going to the bridge. If there's still a captain, he's going to let us out. If not, I'll do it myself." None of us had the energy to go after her. We just stared at the note. Kaito looked like he wanted to scream, but didn't. No one ever came back from the bridge. We survived the next 2 days by moving constantly. We slept in the galley freezer room at night, behind an inner door that could be latched from the inside. During the day, we foraged, first for food, then for anything we could use as a weapon or a signal device. Most of the ship's emergency gear had been pilfered. The only functioning sat beacon we found had its activation circuit fried, probably on purpose. The group shrank again. One of the passengers, a British woman named Elaine, who'd been traveling with her sister, simply stopped eating. She curled up near the cold lockers and didn't move again. Morris covered her with a silver blanket and said a short prayer. Katya refused to give up. "I'm not dying on this ship," she said. "We're not ghosts yet." Her plan was bold, suicidal really. There were still 2 lifeboats that hadn't been disabled. They were older, manual launch tenders used for maintenance drills, bolted just aft of the ship's service crane near the stern cargo deck. She believed we could reach them through the ballast control rooms if we timed it right, if we moved at night, silently, using the old storm drains and avoiding the main stairwells entirely. "I saw the launch rig 2 weeks ago," she said. "You crank it manually, then cut the lines. If it drops clean, we're free. And if not, we'd be trapped at the edge of the ship with nowhere left to run." We waited 2 more nights, watching the infected migrate below decks. They moved in cycles now, strange, slow patterns, gathering in places they used to frequent. One morning, we found several of them in the buffet dining room, standing still around the empty tables like they were waiting for service. It was almost unbearable. The crews had trained all of us in one way or another to move according to schedule, to eat when the music played, to smile when the lights came on, to clap at the end of every performance. And now the infected, the once human passengers, were echoing those rhythms, as if their bodies remembered even after everything else had gone. That second night, we counted 27 total infected across the ship's forward and midsection using the security feeds we managed to access through a partially functional terminal in the crew laundry's dry storage room. There had been more before, dozens more. Either they'd moved to other parts of the ship or were gone. Dead for good. We still didn't fully understand the infection. Some of the early ones, the fast ones, had stopped moving days ago and never got up again. Others stayed mobile far longer, wandering relentlessly between decks. We learned to avoid the ones with the stiff, jerking gaits and focus on timing. When they were active, where they gathered. Our survival had turned into pattern recognition. We planned the escape carefully. The working lifeboat, an older capsule-style Shattharding enclosed tender, was mounted aft near the secondary engine exhaust intake. It could seat up to 18 in theory, but we were down to 6. Me, Katya, Maurice, Kaito, Elena the nurse, and a quiet Filipino steward named Jonas, who had joined us days earlier after escaping through the ceiling panels of the staff cafeteria. We didn't talk about the others. Their names hung like ballast in our minds, weighing every movement. We had one shot at launching the tender. The manual crank system hadn't been used since the last drill months ago, and the corrosion along the track was significant. We had no tools to fix it, only makeshift leverage with bent rebar and stripped galley wrenches. The lowering cable was intact but dry as bone. If it snapped under tension, we'd drop uncontrolled. A 10-meter fall to the sea wouldn't kill us, but it would tear the capsule open if we hit wrong. And the ship was still moving. Slowly, barely perceptible, but enough to drift away from any wreckage if we failed. The real danger wasn't the launch, though. It was getting to it. The path we mapped led from the laundry subcompartment through the chilled bulkhead corridor behind the bakery ovens, past the ballast control panels, then up one level to the open deck under the lifeboat station. We'd be exposed for at least 30 meters. Open air, full view, no cover. And by now, the infected had started congregating around the outer rails. Maybe it was instinct, drawn to the sight of the ocean. Maybe they were just looking for a way off. At 2:40, we moved. Each of us carried what little we had. I had a galley knife and a length of fire hose coiled around my shoulder, more for use as rope than weapon. Katya carried the last flare gun, 2 rounds remaining. Morris had the crowbar, now wrapped in duct tape for grip. Elena had a med kit that was mostly empty except for water purification tablets and a cracked bottle of isopropyl alcohol. Jonas, silent as ever, carried an old radio casing stripped for parts. He hadn't explained why. We reached the chilled bulkhead in under 20 minutes. Crouched low, breath shallow, lights off. The corridor was dark and slick. At the first corner, we passed the body of a woman in a torn crew uniform, half submerged in pooling water. She hadn't turned. Her face was slack, eyes open, throat bruised. The cause wasn't obvious, no one spoke. We moved faster. The smell hit us just before we reached the access stairwell. Rot, chemical cleaners, and something sharp, like decaying plastic or scorched PVC. The lifeboat was close. We climbed the short ladder to the deck above and emerged beneath the maintenance davit. A few stars peeked through the cloud cover above. The sea was calmer than it had been in days. No waves, no wind, just the low hiss of water against the hull. The boat hung above us, still secured in its launch cradle. A good sign. The crank, housed in a steel box bolted to the wall, was intact. Katya and Morris went to work immediately, prying it open, checking tension. I covered the walkway, watching the outer deck rail where the infection had last been seen. And that's when I saw her. Violeta, or what was left of her. She stood near the aft railing in a torn floral print dress. One arm hung broken at the elbow, skin pale and slick. Her eyes were glassy. Her mouth moved slightly, as if whispering something over and over. Her feet shuffled, pivoted. Then she turned fully toward us. I don't know if it was recognition. I don't know if anything of her was still inside, but she screamed. The sound was ragged, dry, almost a sob, and others answered. From the upper deck, from the pool level, from behind us. Katya shouted, "Now!" And Morris wrenched the crank. The boat groaned, shuddered. The steel track squealed. It began to lower, slowly, painfully, 2 centimeters at a time. The infected were moving faster now. We saw them pour out from the casino stairwell and the spa hallway, stumbling and sprinting and clawing at anything that moved. Jonas pulled a flare from his coat pocket, one we didn't know he had, and ignited it, waving it toward the far end of the deck, drawing attention. They veered toward him. He didn't hesitate, he ran. We never saw him again. The boat hit the water like a punch. Katya and Morris unlatched the secondary cable, and I threw myself into the capsule, pulling Elena with me. Kaito followed last, bleeding from a gash above his eye where he'd tripped on the steel grate. Inside, it was pitch black. I slammed the hatch closed and twisted the manual seal. We were floating, untethered, adrift. No one said a word for a long time. The ocean was dead quiet. We drifted for hours, the ship slowly shrinking behind us into a shadowed hulk on the water. Occasionally, lights flickered on board. Emergency systems still working, maybe, or motion-triggered cabin fixtures reacting to the infected moving inside. It didn't matter. We weren't going back. Katya tried to steer us using the manual tiller. The currents were against us. There was no moon. The stars gave us some direction, but we had no GPS, no compass, not even a flare left to signal a passing freighter. Assuming any freighter would stop, assuming anyone would want us aboard. At dawn, we saw the drone again. It hovered far above, then dipped low, just once, before vanishing into the clouds. This time, there was no doubt. We were being watched, cataloged, recorded, but no help came. No voice over the radio, no helicopter, no Coast Guard cutter, just the endless blue-gray horizon and the steady rocking of the capsule. Kaito faded quickly. The wound on his head had begun to swell, and by the second day he was delirious. Elena did what she could, water, rest, antiseptic, but it wasn't enough. He passed in his sleep on the morning of the 3rd day. We wrapped him in the emergency tarp and lowered him into the sea, the silence heavier than anything we had carried before. That night, Katya cried. Not loudly, not in a way that asked for comfort, just silent tears in the dark, hands wrapped around the tiller, staring into the void. I didn't sleep. I listened. To the water, to the wind, to the faint creak of the capsule as it drifted further from the ship. And I thought about the message we'd seen written on the wall. Containment survival. But survival for who? The passengers, the crew, the government, the world. Maybe it was none of us. On the 5th day, we saw land. A narrow strip of pale beach, barely visible through the mist. No towers, no boats, no docks. just a cluster of palm trees and what might have once been a ranger's hut or lighthouse in the distance. We didn't know if it was an island or just a sandbar. We didn't care. We rowed. The capsule scraped onto the sand just before sunset. The beach was silent. No signs of life. No noise, save for the soft rhythm of waves and the distant cry of a gull. I climbed out first, dragging what was left of the supplies behind me. Elena stepped onto the shore and collapsed to her knees, kissing the ground. Katya followed last, her boots wet, hands trembling. She looked up at the sky and said only one thing. "We made it." I wanted to believe her. But behind us, far out to sea, the drone hovered one last time, watching. Then it turned and vanished north. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.